Hi everyone, it's Lisa here. I'm back today with a video for you. I haven't done a video in a little while actually. I've been thinking about what I want to do on my channel, and one of the ideas that I thought I would try out is to run like a little mini series with one stamp set. So I thought I'd kick off this series using the Concord 9th Hello Lovely set. This is not a new stamp set. Many of you will probably own it or covet it. I don't know. It's been out for probably 3 years now. They did recently bring out a die. I don't know, within the last year I guess they brought out a die for this. I don't have the die, so what I thought I would do is show you maybe 4 or 5 different ways in different videos on how to colour this stamp using different mediums. So it does have a stamping sort of section as well. These images here enable you to stamp over the outline image, and I don't see so many cards using this, so I am going to show you how to use those stamping images with it as well, but that will come up in another video. Today I'm going to do some watercolouring with the Zig Clean Colour Real Brush Markers, one of my favourite mediums to watercolour with, and I'm just going to run you through my main supplies. This is my swatch chart for my Zigs. This was actually a download off Jennifer Maguire's website. I just printed out all the different sections for the Zigs, cut them into rectangles, and I've put them on a piece of card. But this is a fantastic reference point for the colours that I want to use today, and I've decided that I will stick to a colour palette of 3 colours. So I'm going to use a yellow, a couple of greens and a couple of blues. So for my yellow, I'm just actually going to use the marker called yellow. For the greens, I'm going to be using pale green and emerald green. And for the blues, I'm going to use cobalt blue and light blue. And I want to keep my colouring quite light. That's always a challenge for me because I do like bright and bold, and I do quite often do several layers, so I want to try and give the look of kind of a lighter look to this image. So I've got some Strathmore Bristol Smooth. This is an A2 panel, really good cardstock for using Zigs on. It's not a watercolour cardstock, so you can't heavily saturate it with water or it will pill, but if you're fairly careful with your water, this works really well and helps you to blend these Zigs a lot better than at least I find on normal watercolour cardstock. I've got an A2 white base card. This is Neenah 110 and some black cardstock. I'm going to use a little trim of black and white striped paper. And then I've got some VersaFine ONYX black ink for stamping. This is a waterproof ink. And I'll use some white detail embossing powder for my sentiment. And I've got a Derwent water brush here. You can use a paintbrush if you like. I always find with Zigs I tend to prefer a water brush. I don't know why, I guess it's just what I'm used to. But this is a fine nib, so I mostly only use a fine nib when I'm doing any watercolouring with this brush, but if I was doing a wash on a background I would use a bigger brush, or probably even a paintbrush with a flat half-inch paintbrush or something. But for today I'm going to be using this water brush, and it's a fine tip. I'm going to do a mix of real life voiceover in this video, and also some kind of post-filming voiceover if you like. I thought I'm not going to show you all of the colouring, I'll show you the main parts of the colouring, but I really just want to show you different ways to use the stamp, I guess. So this isn't it won't be a real-time technique video, but I will do some parts real-time for you just so that you can get an idea. I do plenty of videos on Zigs, so there are other videos on my channel that you can have a look at if you want a bit more of a tutorial on kind of real life colouring of these images. So I'm going to start by stamping the image, and I'm using, as I mentioned before, I'm using VersaFine ONYX black ink. This is waterproof. And I mean, there's so many different ways you can make this image, or any floral image really, look different just by changing the colour of the ink that you stamp it with. And I mean, gold embossing looks lovely, silver looks beautiful, it looks lovely if it's white embossed as well. But today I thought I would go ahead and do it with black. Now that's actually come out quite well. That's you know, my first stamp, and I'm actually going to leave that as it is, as I don't want to make it look too heavy. So I'm going to clean off my stamp and then I'll get started on the colouring. Okay, so I've taped my panel down to a little mini clipboard. I picked this up from a local stationery store here in the UK. It's a great size for watercolouring an A2 panel. You don't have a lot of space around you, but you don't need it for this. And the reason that I've taped this down is not because I'm going to be using a lot of water, but it's just because I find it easy to while I'm colouring, to be able to turn the image. And if I tape it to my glass media mat here, it just isn't obviously as easy to move. I certainly can't keep moving that around, so it's far easier to do it this way. So I've used some low tack tape here. This is the equivalent of painter's tape. It's called frog tape here in the UK, and I'm going to start by colouring the leaves. So I'm going to start by using the pale green, and as I mentioned before, I really don't want to have a heavy look to this card. I want to have my colouring quite light, so I'm going to start with my lightest colour, add a bit of that down and just blend that out with the water brush. And as you can see, it's really pale. I'll just come in a little bit more. And I'm just going to go around all of the leaves, and I'm going to do all the leaves in one colour. I'm not going to change the green. I want to try and keep this a fairly simple colour palette, because I just think that that adds to the overall kind of clean and simplistic look that I'm trying to go for. So adding in the green there, and I felt like I needed a little bit more there just to give a bit more colour. I'm leaving that white area there as well. So I'm going to go round and do every single leaf. I won't talk you through all of that. It's pretty much the same process for all of them. Lay some colour down and just blend that out gradually. The small leaves, I mean, you don't even really need to add water to this. You could literally just put tiny bits down in each leaf. They are small, so it doesn't give you a lot of room anyway to leave a white highlight or add lots of detail. So I'll just put a little bit of music on while I'm doing this bit of the colouring, and then I'll be back to do the next layer. So now that I've done the first layer on the leaves, I'm just going to start to work on this large floral image here and the smaller four, well I should say 5 flowers there. I'm going to do these all starting off with the light blue, and the reason that I'm moving to this now is because I want to allow time for these to dry completely before I put my second layer on. So again, the process is going to be the same. I'm going to try and keep the look of this really light, and although Zigs are quite pigmented, and I would be wary about laying down a huge amount of pigment if this was a deeper, bolder colour. As you can see, it is quite light, and so you can get away with laying down a little bit more. I do try to change my colour combinations when I colour. I don't think I have ever coloured this image with these colours before, and I have done lots of cards with it in the past, but never with these blues and these greens. So as you can see, it looks really light and airy, and to be honest, I think you could just do the whole image in one layer like this and it would still look really pretty. I will try and add a little bit more depth in with a slightly darker colour, but sometimes there's a lot to be said for less is more, and I think that, you know, this is one of those images that really allows you to do so much with it, and you've got some really big areas like this area here that I'm colouring at the moment, this floral. It's such a good size for colouring. I mean, if you want to, I'm going to probably do this image in pencils as well, just to show you how it looks with those as well, but I think it really lends itself to watercolour. So now I'm just going to go through and do the other blue flowers, and then I'll be back to add some other layers on. Okay, so I've done the blue now, and I'm going to go back to the leaves, and I'm just going to add in a tiny bit of the emerald green. I'm going to be a bit careful here because actually I really like the look of this even as it is. I could almost just go with it like that, but I just want to see what happens if I add a tiny bit of depth into some of the leaves. And I'm going to leave the smaller leaves because they are small and I don't want them to turn really, really dark. So I'm going to take the emerald green and I'm going to scribble it off onto an acrylic block because that's going to help me get more control over my colouring. So I'm just going to pick a tiny bit up from that block, and then I'm going to add that in just to the edges of some of the leaves. As I say, the larger leaves, not the smaller ones. I just don't think I want to saturate those. I think I'd lose the look that I'm going for. So I'm just touching this. It's a sort of bluey green. I thought it would tone quite well with the blue in the flowers. And I'm just adding tiny bits off the acrylic block and then into some of the areas on the leaves. And I haven't coloured this with thinking about shading at all or light source or anything. It's really just to put some colour onto an image and see how it turns out. Really, I do like the addition, this slight sort of addition of that bluey tinge. I can see that I've got a little line there, so I'm just going to go through and blend that out. Lines don't bother me particularly in colouring, but you know, you can still blend that out. And I think that what you can see is that I have managed to get some extra depth without losing the look that I was going for. So I just need to scribble down a little bit more and add that in now around this leaf. This is a larger leaf, so I can afford to put a little bit more down. So it really doesn't look heavy at all, and a lot of that is because you're taking it from the block. If I was adding the marker direct onto the paper, then this, I just wouldn't have the same control, and it probably would end up a lot darker. But as it is, it still retains that kind of light, airy feel. So I'm going to go on and do the same with the blue flower now, and I'm also then just going to colour these smaller flowers in yellow. And for that I'll be adding yellow to my block and picking it up from there, again because I want to keep those light. So I'll be back at the end of the colouring. And that finishes the watercolouring. I actually love how this has turned out. You can't see the yellow so much on camera probably, but you can see it in real life. But it is quite subtle. It tones really well with the green and the blue. So I'm happy with that as it is. And I think I'm just going to go ahead and mount the card up now. I don't know if you noticed, you probably didn't. You can see it here if you look close up. I did actually pick up a tiny bit of green off my block when I was colouring that blue area, so I ended up with a slight green tinge in that area there. But to be honest, it really didn't matter. It actually looks quite nice. It helps to sort of blend it with the rest of the image, and in fact I maybe should have added a tiny little bit of green in. I think I might go back and do that actually. So this is what happens, you faff around and you, I'm going to put some on the block here, you faff around and just keep adding bits. So I really want it to be subtle though, so I'm being very careful about adding that in, and it just comes, it's like a really beautiful teal colour. So you can just add it in over the top and it just gives a slightly different, you know, gradient to that, to just having all the leaves blue. I mean, there isn't a lot of detail in my colouring, so to add a little bit through layers can be quite important. So I've added a bit in there, and as you can see, again close up, you can really see that sort of tinge. It's like an aquamarine. It's very, very pretty if you add that green over the top, but I think it would be harder to see on camera take my word for it. Maybe that's the best idea. So I am going to leave that now before I get carried away, and I'm just going to go ahead and mount this up. So I've added a strip of black and white striped paper from My Favourite Things onto the bottom of my card base here, and I've just trimmed off the excess at the sides, and I've trimmed this panel down so that it's just going to sit and show a tiny bit at the bottom. And I've added some tape onto the back, and you can see this is what happens when you film. So I actually dropped my ink pad, and this was the second panel that I stamped because I actually switched off or forgot to put on my camera while I was colouring the first part of the image, so I had to re-stamp it again and put it on the clipboard and start that section of the video again. And at the same time I dropped my ink pad, but I wasn't going to waste the paper, so I've turned it over and I'm just going to adhere that down now on top. I mean, this is the joys of filming. Anyone who creates videos will totally understand that as soon as you turn the camera on, that is what happens. So I've mounted that up onto there, and you've just got the little peak of it at the bottom below, and I'm going to add a sentiment on, probably just going to sit on one of those corner areas there. So that's the final card. I've mounted it up, as I said, onto some white Neenah 110, that's the Solar Crest cardstock. I white heat embossed one of the sentiments from the set onto some black cardstock, and I used Hero Art's white detail embossing powder for that, and I've just popped that up with foam tape. And I did toy with the idea of adding some sequins, and I got them out and placed them on the cardstock, and I don't know, I just felt that I really liked it kept simple, and that the sequins, maybe raindrops would have looked a little bit better, but I just felt it didn't really need anything else. It just would kind of detract from the image, I suppose. So I didn't put any on, but you know, it's the big question, isn't it? Sequins or no sequins? And then of course, where do you put the sequins is a whole other dilemma. But anyway, that is the card. I hope that you enjoyed the video. As I say, most of it has been real. It ended up being real time really, but I hope that you got something out of it. I'm going to list most of the main products that I've used in the description below, and all details will also be over on my blog as well, so everything is linked in the description below. But I will be back soon with my second card in the series, and I hope to see you then. Bye for now.